I saw my son on a bench in the park sitting there with his baby in a pile of suitcases. I asked, "Why are you here and not at the office of my company, the one I entrusted to you?" He lowered his head. I was fired. My father-in-law said our blood doesn't match his. Said I'm bad for the brand. I chuckled. Get in the car, baby. He didn't even know who had actually been paying his father-in-law's salary all these years. Please subscribe to our channel and write in the comments which state or city you are listening from. Enjoy the story. Chicago looks deceptively calm from the height of the 25th floor. Gray rooftops, the steel-cold Chicago River, endless streams of cars looking like ants carrying their burdens. I stood by the tinted window of my office holding a cup of cold tea, watching the movement. To some, it is just city traffic. To me, it is the circulatory system of my business. Vance Logistics, a name that might not mean much to the average person on the street, but one that opens any door in ports from New York to Los Angeles. I built this empire for 30 years. I started with one used truck and debts that would make other people put a noose around their necks. I learned to be tough when needed and invisible when it was profitable. Especially invisible. Money likes silence and big money loves dead silence. That is why you won't find my photo in the society pages. I always preferred to stay in the shadows pulling the strings while others strutted on stage. That was my strategy and it worked flawlessly until recently. My gaze fell on the family photo framed on my desk. Marcus, my son, my only weakness and my greatest investment. 3 years ago, I took a step that many of my partners would have called risky. I decided to test him. Not the kind of test where rich kids sit in their father's offices pretending to work. No, I wanted Marcus to go through the real school of life. I bought a mid-sized company, a logistics firm called Midwest Cargo, and I put someone else in charge. No, not my son. I put Preston Galloway there. He was the father of my son's wife, a man whose ego was inflated far more than his bank account. Preston Galloway. I smirked at my reflection in the glass. The man was a walking caricature of high society. He loved to talk about old money, about heritage, about how business is an art accessible only to the chosen few. He didn't know one thing. Midwest Cargo belongs to me. Through a chain of offshore accounts and proxies, the ultimate beneficiary of everything he was so proud of was me, the black woman he called a simple traitor behind my back. I sent Marcus to work for him as the commercial director without any protection, without my direct interference. "Mama, I can handle it," Marcus told me back then. "I want Tiffany and her father to respect me for my own merit, not for your checkbook." I agreed. I wanted him to learn how to take a hit, to see the ugly side of people when they think they have power over you. And he saw it. Oh, how he saw it. Every Sunday I drove to their mansion in Lake Forest for dinner. This house with its columns and manicured lawns was the embodiment of the Galloway's ambition. The irony was that the mortgage for this house was indirectly paid from the dividends of my own company. But I stayed silent. I sat at the table carefully cutting my roast beef and listened. "Marcus, who holds a glass like that?" Preston would grimace, adjusting his napkin. "This is a vintage Cabernet. Not malt liquor from the corner store. You still have so much to learn about etiquette. In our circle, such small details betray one's breeding or lack thereof." Tiffany, my daughter-in-law, would just smile coldly, stroking the diamond bracelet on her thin wrist. She never defended her husband. On the contrary, she enjoyed the humiliation. She looked at Marcus like a useful but slightly defective accessory. "Daddy just wants what's best for you, honey," she would say in her slow, sugary voice. "You should be grateful he took you under his wing. Where would you be without our family?" I drank my tea and recorded. Every word, every smirk. I saw my son's fists clenching under the table. I saw the light fading in his eyes, but I waited. I gave him my word not to interfere until he asked. That was the deal. But in recent months my intuition, that beast that saved me back in the 90s, started to growl low in my throat. Something had changed. The air became thick. First it was little things. Reports from Midwest Cargo started arriving with delays. Not a day or two, which is acceptable, but a week. In logistics, a week is an eternity. Preston explained it as a software update and staff optimization. But I know this business from the inside out. When a director starts talking about optimization, it means he is trying to hide holes in the budget. Then Tiffany stopped answering my calls. Before she at least pretended to be polite, hoping for expensive gifts for the holidays. Now silence. We are at a reception. We have a charity evening. Tiffany is resting. It was like a wall had gone up. But the final straw that made me truly alert was Marcus. He came to see me a week ago just for half an hour. He looked terrible. Gray complexion, hollow cheeks, nervous hand movements. He said everything was fine, just a lot of work closing the quarter. But I wasn't looking at his face. I was looking at his wrist. There was no watch on his arm. The PC Philippe I gave him for his 30th birthday. A status piece, expensive but mostly memorable. He never took it off. Where is the watch, son? I asked, pouring him coffee. He flinched and pulled down his shirt cuff. At the repair shop, Mama. The clasp was acting up. Decided to get it cleaned while I was at it. A lie. I heard it not in his voice, but in the pause he took before answering. Marcus never had a clasp act up, and he never lied to me so clumsily. The watch wasn't in repair. It was either sold or pawned. Why would the commercial director of a successful firm pawn a watch? The answer could only be one. He urgently needed money. Money he couldn't ask me for. After he left, I didn't call him or Preston. I called Luther, my head of security. I need a full audit of Midwest Cargo, I said dryly. And find out what is happening in the Galloway house unofficially. Just watch. A week passed. The audit was still in progress, but the anxiety inside me was growing by the hour, like pressure in a steam boiler. Today I decided not to wait for reports. I got into the car. Where to, Miss Ellie? Luther asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. His calm, broad face always had a sobering effect on me. Just drive, Luther, towards the lake. I want to see the autumn leaves. We drove slowly. Leaves were falling onto the wet asphalt. The city was preparing for winter. We drove past elite neighborhoods where, behind high fences, hidden lives full of fake brilliance were led. I knew the price of that brilliance. Most often it was bought on credit. We turned toward a small park not far from the Galloway house. Usually nannies with strollers or elderly couples walk here. But today it was empty and damp. And suddenly my gaze caught a figure. On the edge of the park, on a plain wooden bench, sat a man. He sat hunched over, dropping his head into his hands. Next to him stood 3 large suitcases, and nearby, kicking fallen leaves, stomped a little boy in a bright jacket. My grandson. My heart skipped a beat, but my mind remained cold. I recognized that coat. I recognized that posture, the posture of a man who had the ground knocked out from under his feet. Stop, I commanded. My voice sounded quieter than usual, but Luther hit the brakes instantly. I didn't run out of the car. I stepped out calmly, adjusted my coat, and walked toward the bench. My steps on the gravel sounded crisp and measured. Marcus raised his head only when my shadow fell over him. His eyes were red, not from tears. Men in our family don't cry in public, but from insomnia and despair. Mama. He said it as if he had seen a ghost. I looked at the suitcases, expensive leather piled right in the dirt. I looked at my grandson Trey, who saw me, smiled, and reached out his little hands. And I looked at my son again. Why are you here, Marcus? I asked. My tone was even businesslike. No hysterics. I needed information. Why aren't you at the office? Why aren't you home? He chuckled bitterly and looked away toward where the spires of the Galloway mansion were visible behind the trees. I don't have an office anymore, Mama, and I don't have a home. Explain. Preston fired me this morning for incompetence, and an hour ago Tiffany put my things out, said she's filing for divorce. I stood silent, digesting the information. Incompetence. Divorce. Kicked out on the street with a child. What did she say, Marcus? Word for word. He clenched his fists so hard his knuckles turned white. She said she was tired of pretending. That his voice trembled, but he forced himself to continue. That I'm a loser dragging their family down. And my father-in-law said, our blood doesn't match. Said, I'm too street for their high-ass brand. The wind tore a yellow leaf from a branch and threw it at my feet. I looked at that leaf, then at the mansion in the distance, 2 Street. There was no pain inside me. Pain is for the weak. Inside me a switch clicked, the same one that turned on before complex negotiations about swallowing up competitors. Only now the stakes weren't money. I looked at my grandson, picked him up. He smelled of milk and baby shampoo. Blood doesn't match, you say? I asked quietly. A smile appeared on my face. Not a kind, motherly smile, but the one my competitors saw before signing acts of surrender. Get in the car, baby, I said to my son, nodding to Luther to take the suitcases. Mama, I have nowhere to go. They blocked the corporate card. I don't even have money for a taxi. Get in, I repeated softly, but in a way that made arguing impossible. We are going home. I opened the back door of my Maybach. Marcus, still bewildered, looking like a beaten dog, sat on the leather interior. He didn't even suspect that the man who had just kicked him out for incompetence had been receiving a salary from my pocket all these years, and that the house he was thrown out of stood on land owned by my holding company. Preston Galloway wanted to play aristocrat. Well, I will show him what real power looks like. I sat next to my son and took out my phone. Luther's name lit up on the screen. The game had begun. The car door closed with that characteristic dull sound that cuts off the outside world. Inside it smelled of expensive leather and silence. Marcus sat with his head down. His hands lay limply on his knees. My grandson, tired from the stress, instantly fell asleep in his car seat, cheek pressed against the strap. I looked at my son's profile. In his slumped figure, total defeat was readable. He believed them. He believed in family, in respect, in the idea that if you are honest and hardworking, you will be appreciated. Such naivety. But I didn't blame him. I blamed myself for letting this spectacle drag on. I didn't comfort him with empty words like, everything will be okay. In business, as in life, okay doesn't happen by itself. Okay is the result of competent planning and ruthless execution. I took out my second phone, the one whose number only 5 people in the world knew. Luther, I said as soon as he answered, I need a full financial cross-section of Midwest cargo for the last 3 years. Not the official reports for the IRS, but the real movement of funds. Every transaction, every contractor, every check over $5,000. Understood, Miss Ellie. Deadline. His voice was passionless as always. Yesterday. And one more thing, pull up the documents on the Lake Forest property. Full ownership history, including liens and current land lease status. Marcus turned his head and looked at me with bewilderment. Mama, why do you need that? The land under their house. It's their property. Preston always said it was the family estate. I almost laughed. A family estate built in '98 on money from selling bootleg liquor, which he successfully laundered through my own bank without even suspecting it. Son, I covered his hand with mine. It was cold. Preston Galloway said a lot of things, but documents as a rule say something completely different. Rest. We are going home. While the car glided smoothly down the avenues, I didn't look out the window. I worked. Tables, schemes, and graphs were already opening on my tablet. My brain switched into calculator mode. The rage that flared up in me at the sight of my grandson on a dirty bench transformed. It stopped being a hot emotion and became cold fuel, pure energy of action. I checked the chains of companies. Midwest Cargo, a subsidiary of Northern Logistics, which in turn belongs to my holding company, through a fund in the Cayman Islands. Preston Galloway was listed as CEO, but his powers were strictly limited by the charter, a charter he apparently hadn't reread in a long time, or he thought that I, an old woman, had forgotten its clauses. And here is the land, the lot in Lake Forest. Formally, the house belongs to the Galloways, but the land is on a long-term lease from Zenith Development, and 100% of Zenith Development shares lie in the safe of my office. The lease agreement expires. I squinted at the date. In 2 months, and there is a clause about the lessor's right to unilaterally review conditions in case of tenant bad faith. Bad faith. What a beautiful, concise phrase. I made a note in my notebook. Point 1, lease audit. Marcus was silent the whole way. He was crushed by Tiffany's betrayal. I knew that feeling when you are stabbed in the back by those you shielded with your chest. But I also knew that the best medicine for heartache is being busy. And soon Marcus would have a lot of work. We drove onto the grounds of my estate in Bington Hills. Pine trees, silence, a high fence. It was safe here. My rules applied here. As soon as the car stopped, the driver's door opened. Luther got out and, walking around the hood, opened the door for me. In his hand was a thin gray folder. That was strange. Usually, he handed over documents in the office. If he was giving them now on the street, it meant something urgent. Miss Ellie. He extended the folder as soon as my feet touched the cobblestones. This came 10 minutes ago through closed channels from the district police station. I took the folder without changing my expression. I opened the report. Date today. Time 2:30 p.m. An hour after Marcus was kicked out the door. Applicant Preston C. Galloway. Nature of the report: grand larceny. Citizen Marcus Vance, leaving his place of residence, secretly stole family valuables belonging to the Galloway family, namely a collection of antique coins, 19th century silverware, and jewelry belonging to Mrs. Galloway. Total damage estimated at $250,000. I closed the folder slowly, carefully. Mama, what's there? Marcus stood nearby, holding his sleeping son. He looks so vulnerable right now. Nothing. I lied calmly. Just utility bills. Go inside, Marcus. The nanny will take the baby now, and you need to take a shower and eat. I'll come in half an hour. He nodded and wandered toward the porch. I watched him until the door closed. Then I turned to Luther. My voice became quiet. Almost a whisper, but steel rang in it. They didn't just kick him out, Luther. They want to put him in prison. Luther squinted slightly. 250 grand. That's a felony. Up to 15 years. They want guarantees he won't claim a division of assets in the divorce. Blackmail by criminal case. Exactly. I nodded. Stupid, greedy people. They think Marcus is just an ex-son-in-law with no one to stand up for him. They forgot whose last name is in his passport. I opened the folder again and looked at Preston's signature one more time. Sweeping with flourishes, the signature of a man confident in his impunity. Luther, I said, looking at the tops of the pine trees, I don't need just an audit. I need a complete total purge. Check all their loans, all personal accounts, all of Tiffany's contacts. Every step they took in the last 6 months must be documented. And find me the detective who accepted this report. I want to know how much. They paid him. It will be done. Where do we start the attack? I chuckled. Small. Block their passes to the Midwest cargo office. Tomorrow morning, Preston Galloway will find out that his electronic key no longer fits the doors of his own office. Let him run around, get nervous while I study exactly what he has been managing there. I tapped the folder against my palm. They wanted to accuse my son of theft. Well, I will show them what real theft is. I will steal everything from them. Their business, their house, their reputation, and leave them only their high-ass blood. Let's see how nutritious that is. I turned around and walked into the house. For the first time in many years, I felt absolutely alive. The mechanism was launched. The gears began to turn, and only one person could stop this process, me. But I had no intention of stopping. The office on the second floor of my house turned into an operational headquarters. The large oak desk was piled with documents, and on the wall hung a whiteboard, where I had already started drawing a diagram of the Galloway's connections. Marcus sat opposite me, pale but collected. Next to him worked 2 of my best lawyers, Anne and Victor. They asked no unnecessary questions, only dryly clarifying details. Marcus, remember? And tapped her pen on the table. Did you sign this acceptance act for containers from China? Date: August 12th. My son frowned, rubbing his temples. No, in August I was on a business trip in Baltimore. I physically couldn't have signed that. But the signature is yours, Victor noted, showing a scan. A very high-quality forgery. I watched this process from the side, sitting in my chair. I didn't need to interfere in the details. My people knew their business. My task was global. I opened my laptop and logged into the holding company's banking interface. Green lines glowed on the screen. Active credit lines of subsidiaries. Among them was Midwest Cargo. Overdraft limit $1 million. This is the money the company lives on during cash gaps, pays salaries, rent, customs duties. Without this needle, Preston's business would suffocate in a week. I hovered the cursor over the suspend service button. My finger froze for only a second. Not from doubt, but from anticipation. It was like a surgeon applying a clamp to an artery to stop bleeding. Only in this case I was cutting off oxygen to a tumor. Click. Status changed to blocked by bank security service. Reason: internal counterparty check. A vague bureaucratic formulation perfectly suited to drive someone crazy. I leaned back in my chair and shifted my gaze to another monitor. It was streaming video from surveillance cameras in the Midwest cargo office. My specialists installed these cameras 5 years ago for security. Preston thought they only recorded to the security archive. He didn't know a direct channel came to me. On the screen I saw his office. Preston Galloway was pacing from corner to corner, gesturing furiously. He was yelling at the chief accountant, a poor woman with shaking hands. There was no sound, but by his red face and the bulging veins in his neck, it was clear. He had just tried to make a payment, and the bank rejected it. He grabbed the phone. I knew who he was calling, the branch manager, Peter Henderson. Preston considered him a friend. They played golf together on Thursdays. I took my phone and typed a short message to Peter Henderson. Preston will call. Say it's a system glitch. New York is checking the algorithms. Time frame unknown. No exceptions. On the screen, I saw Preston freeze with the receiver at his ear. Then his face fell. He started arguing, banging his fist on the table. Then he slammed the phone onto the cradle. System glitch, I read on his lips. He believed it. Of course he believed it. In his worldview, he is an important bird and the bank is just a service. It couldn't even occur to him that the bank is me. He sat in his chair, loosened his tie, and poured himself water. You could see him calming himself down. It's nonsense. They'll fix it tomorrow. He didn't understand that this wasn't a breakdown. It was a tourniquet and I would be tightening it slowly. Mama. Marcus's voice pulled me from my contemplation. We found something else. Look. He handed me a printout. A loan agreement in his name from a private individual for $50,000 secured by his car. I didn't sign this. Who is the lender? I asked, scanning the text. Some Fast Cash LLC. I exchanged glances with Luther, who stood by the door. He nodded and left. In 10 minutes I would have a dossier on this Fast Cash. Most likely it was a shell company for Preston. The scheme was primitive, like everything this aristocrat did. Hang debts on the son-in-law, take the property, and put the cash in his own pocket. Don't worry, I told my son. This paper isn't worth the ink it's printed with. We'll run a handwriting analysis. But first, my phone on Marcus's table vibrated. Tiffany's photo lit up on the screen. Silence hung in the room. Marcus reached for the phone, but I intercepted his hand. Put it on speaker and stay quiet. I'll do the talking. No, wait. I quickly changed my mind. If I answer, she'll get suspicious. She needs to think Marcus is broken and alone. Answer, I commanded, but promise nothing. Just listen and record the call. Marcus took a deep breath, pressed accept, and the record icon. Hello. Well, had enough, hero? Tiffany's voice was soaked with venom and triumph. How was sleeping at the train station? Or did you run to mommy's skirt? Marcus clenched his jaw, looking at me. I gestured, calm down. What do you want, Tiff? I want to resolve everything concisely. Her tone shifted to businesslike, but the falseness cut the ear. Daddy is ready to withdraw the police report. We aren't animals, Marcus. We understand. You stumbled. You stole. It happens to anyone when there's no money. I didn't steal anything, Marcus shouted. Sure. Don't yell, she interrupted. Listen carefully. You come to the notary tomorrow, sign a paper. It's purely a formality. An admission that you took money from the company cash register as a loan and promised to return it. The sum is small, just 100 grand. 100 grand. Marcus' eyes widened. That's the price of your freedom, honey. Sign and the report disappears. She paused, savoring the moment. And I'll allow you to see Trey on weekends under my supervision. I felt everything inside me turn cold. Blackmail using a child, the lowest thing a woman can do. And if I don't sign, Marcus asked hollowly. Then you go to jail, she said simply, as if talking about the weather. And your son will be raised by a new daddy. A normal one from our circle. Daddy has already found a match for me. Think, Marcus. You have until morning. Click. Marcus dropped the phone on the table and covered his face with his hands. She's a monster. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in crimson tones. A beautiful sunset, bloody. No, Marcus, I said quietly. She isn't a monster. She's just a fool. A greedy, narcissistic fool. I turned to my lawyers. Did you hear that? We heard Miss Ellie, and said. Attempted extortion. blackmail, coercion into a deal. The recording is excellent. Perfect. Attach it to the case. I looked at the monitor with the cameras again. Preston was still sitting in his office staring blankly at the wall. He thought he had won. He thought he had cornered us. He didn't know that Tiffany had just hand-delivered me the detonator that would blow their lives to splinters. Luther, I called out as he returned to the room. I have a new task. We need to prepare a meeting with a notary, but not their pocket lawyer, a real one. And prepare documents to buy out Preston's debts to the banks. All debts, even for his car. You want to become his sole creditor? I want to become his sole nightmare. I walked over to my son and put a hand on his shoulder. Tomorrow you aren't going anywhere. Tomorrow we strike back, but not where they expect. I smiled. It was the smile of a predator that finally smelled blood. They wanted a confession. They will get it, but it will be a confession of their own. Worthlessness. The next evening, Marcus and I didn't go to the notary. Instead, I put on my strict gray suit, high quality, but deliberately modest, without labels or flashy jewelry. I looked exactly how they imagined me, a well-off retiree, a widow who got lucky once and is now living out her days watering geraniums. We went to a pre-auction cocktail party at the Modern Art Gallery. This was Preston's place of power. Here gathered those he considered his circle. Gallery owners, antiques dealers, heirs of old names, and of course the nouveau riche desperately trying to buy themselves a history. Preston and Tiffany were there. They were shining. Tiffany, in a new champagne-colored dress, bought, I'm sure, with the Midwest Cargo corporate card under entertainment expenses, held her glass like it was a scepter. Preston, flushed from cognac, was the center of attention of a small group. I took a glass of mineral water and stood in the shadow of a column not far from their circle. No one noticed me. I was background, part of the decor. Oh, it was such a drama. Tiffany broadcasted, theatrically rolling her eyes. Marcus just disappeared. Couldn't handle the pressure. You know, business at this level requires nerves of steel. And he, well, let's just say he was too simple for it. Street background. You understand? Some lady nodded sympathetically. Poor Tiff, left alone with a child and a business on her hands. Oh, come now. Preston stepped in, adjusting his bow tie. We will manage. The Galloway family has survived worse times. We are cleansing ourselves of ballast. Sometimes you need to cut off a rotten branch for the tree to flourish. By the way, gentlemen, I have amazing news. Our company is reaching a new level. We are attracting a major investor from Europe. I almost choked on my water. Investor from Europe with blocked accounts and a zero balance. This wasn't even a lie. It was a phantasmagoria. But people listened. They nodded. They believed the pretty picture. Preston noticed me. For a second, irritation flashed in his eyes as if he saw a stain on the tablecloth. But he immediately put on a mask of noble condescension and walked toward me. Mrs. Vance, he rumbled, attracting the attention of those around. What a surprise. You decided to come out into society. He came closer, washing over me with the smell of expensive perfume and alcohol fumes. I came to hear about your successes, Preston, I said quietly, looking him straight in the bridge of his nose, and to find out how my grandson is. He smiled patronizingly and patted me on the shoulder. I barely held back from brushing his hand off. The grandson is wonderful. He has a new nanny with an Oxford accent. Now, as for successes, you know, Mrs. Vance, I've wanted to tell you for a long time. Marcus, he's a good boy. Truly handy, but not an eagle. He didn't have, you know, the breeding and understanding of subtle matters. We tried to pull him up, educate him, but genes are stubborn things. Don't be offended, but he just didn't pull our weight. Wait, I repeated like an echo. I understand. Yes, wait, he became animated. Big business is a game for the chosen. You need scope, courage, connections, and Marcus, he counted every penny saved on paper clips. Pettiness is a sign of poverty of spirit. But don't worry, we'll take care of him. If he signs the papers, we won't let him starve. Maybe we'll set him up as a driver in our fleet. He likes cars. I nodded, taking a sip of water to hide my smirk. A driver in the fleet I bought. You are very generous, Preston. We try. He puffed out his chest self-importantly. Well, excuse me. Business awaits. Investors, you know, don't like to wait. He turned and walked deeper into the hall. I followed him with my gaze. He didn't go to the group of bankers. He didn't go to the famous patrons. He headed to a far corner toward an inconspicuous service exit where a short balding man with shifty eyes stood. I recognized this man. Boris the Owl Phillimore. In certain circles he was known as a cleaner, but he didn't wash floors. He laundered problematic assets, bought stolen goods, liquidated bankrupt property for pennies, helped warehouse inventory disappear. If Preston is talking to the owl, it means only one thing. He isn't looking for an investor. He is looking for a fence. I discreetly took out my phone and turned on the camera, covering it with my clutch. The zoom allowed me to see their faces clearly enough. Preston was explaining something heatedly, poking a finger at his smartphone screen. The owl listened, curling his lips skeptically, then nodded and took out a notepad. I saw Preston hand him a flash drive, a small black flash drive. What was on it? Client database, logistics schemes, or documents for equipment? I remembered Preston's words about ballast. He didn't just kick Marcus out. He decided to sell off the company's assets before I interfered. He thought the bank glitch was temporary and he needed cash to cover holes right now. He was selling trucks, my trucks, for cash under the table. This was no longer just theft. This was grand larceny committed by a group of persons by prior conspiracy. I felt the phone vibrate. A message from Luther. Miss Ellie, we cracked their correspondence. They are preparing the sale of 10 Mack trucks tomorrow morning. The buyer is a structure connected to organized crime. Price is 30% of market value. Cash. I looked at Preston. He was shaking Phillimore's hand and smiling. He was selling my property to gangsters for a third of the price to buy himself a little more time playing the aristocrat. This was a mistake. A fatal mistake. I finished my water and put the glass on a passing waiter's tray. Thank you, I said into the void. Preston walked past me again, glowing from the success of the deal. Still here, Mrs. Vance. He threw over his shoulder. Don't be bored. Try the canapes with caviar. They say they're not bad. At least eat like a human being. Bon appétit, Preston, I answered. Enjoy it while you can. He didn't even slow down, confident that I was just an old, envious woman. He didn't hear the verdict in my voice. I walked out of the gallery into the fresh air. Marcus was waiting for me in the car. Well, he asked anxiously. Better than I thought. I sat down and fastened my seatbelt. They didn't just make a mistake, Marcus. They exposed themselves completely. What happened? Your father-in-law decided to sell our trucks for parts tomorrow morning. Marcus turned pale. But that's the end. If the trucks go, they aren't going anywhere. I took out my phone and dialed the number of the city's police chief. We had known each other since the 90s when I helped equip their patrols. They won't even leave the parking lot. Hello, Chief Miller. Good evening. It's Ellie Vance. Yes, long time no hear. I have a request for you. No, not personal, official. I have information about a planned deal with stolen transport 10 semi-trucks tomorrow morning. Yes, I'll give the license plates and addresses. Need to catch both the seller and the buyer red-handed. Yes, exactly like that. Thank you. I owe you one. I hung up and looked at my son. Tomorrow, Preston Galloway will receive his investment trench in the form of handcuffs. But this is just the beginning. I want to know where he put the money he stole before this, and why he contacted the owl so confidently. There is something else there, something deeper. The car started moving. I looked at the lights of the night city. Preston thought I was a harmless old lady. He didn't know I was the iceberg that just ripped open the hull of his Titanic, and the water was already rushing into the hold. I didn't sleep all night, not from excitement. That had long ago been replaced by cold concentration, but from anticipation. In the morning, Luther was supposed to bring the results of the full audit, including recovered deleted files from the Midwest cargo servers. At 7 a.m., I was already sitting in my office. A cup of strong coffee stood before me, untouched. The door opened without a knock. Luther walked in, and by his face I understood. Everything was much worse than we assumed. Usually his face is impenetrable, like a concrete slab, but now a hard disgust lurked in the corners of his lips. He placed a thick black folder on the table. Not gray like usual, but black. This was our unspoken code. Critical threat. Read, Miss Ellie. Just keep yourself together. I opened the folder. First lay the report on Marcus' credit history. I scanned the numbers and felt the blood drain from my face. Not from fear but from revulsion. In my son's name, 12 loans were taken out in different banks, from major ones to payday lenders. The total sum was $1.5 million. Dates of issue the last 6 months. Signatures Marcus Vance Forensics confirmed, Luther said hollowly. High-quality forgery using a plotter. But that's not the worst part. Look at page 5. I turned the page. There were scans of shitey agreements. For these loans, the guarantor was Midwest Cargo, and the collateral was the personal property of the general director. Meaning on paper, Marcus took the money and Preston, like a kind father-in-law, vouched for him with the firm's assets. The scheme was diabolically simple and cynical. They took the money, funneled it offshore through shell companies. The list was attached on the next page and hung the debts on Marcus. When the time came to pay, they planned to declare Midwest Cargo bankrupt due to my son's ineffective management and put him in prison for fraud. They weren't just stealing. They were building a scaffold for him brick by brick, month by month. While we ate dinner with them on Sundays, while Tiffany smiled at her husband, they were methodically preparing his destruction. That's not all. Luther's voice became quieter. We cracked Tiffany's cloud storage. The folder is called Dirt. He placed a tablet before me and pressed play. On the screen was video filmed by a hidden camera in their bedroom. Marcus sits on the edge of the bed, tired, upset. Tiffany walks around him. Her voice sounds caring, but the words hit exactly on target. Marcus, you're so nervous lately. Maybe you should take some pills. You've become aggressive. You're scaring the baby. I'm not aggressive, Tiff. I'm just tired. Marcus explodes. See, you're yelling. You're unstable. Video cuts. Next file. Another provocation again. She drives him to screaming, to tears, to that state where a person loses control. She wasn't calming her husband. She was training him like a dog to show these recordings in court later and say, "Look, he's a psycho. He can't be trusted with a child." I pressed pause. My hand didn't tremble. On the contrary, it became hard as stone. If up to this moment I still had some moral limits, after all they are my grandson's relatives, now they vanished, evaporated. Before me were not people. Before me were parasites, predatory, ruthless parasites feeding on my son's life. Is there anything else? I asked in an icy tone. Yes, the most important thing at the end of the folder. I turned the last pages and froze. Pledge agreement. Borrower Midwest Cargo LLC. Lender, some investment fund registered in the Cayman Islands. Sum $5 million. Collateral, General License for International Freight Transportation number 78A1. The air in the office became thick and viscous. License number 78A1. This is not a Midwest Cargo license. This is the license of the parent company, Vance Logistics. My license, the heart of my entire empire. A document without which hundreds of trucks will stop. Warehouses will close. Contracts with federal chains will collapse. Preston didn't have the right to even touch this document. He didn't have access to the originals. How? I exhaled. They made a duplicate, Luther answered. Through a corrupt notary. They certified the copy as an original and pledged it for the loan. The money is supposed to hit their account today by noon. If they receive this tranche, they disappear and the creditors come to us for the license. I closed the folder slowly. $5 million. The price for which they sold not only Marcus but me as well. They decided I was an old fool who wouldn't notice anything until it was too late. They decided to go all in. I stood up and walked to the window. Down in the yard, Marcus was playing with his son. He tossed the toddler in the air and the boy laughed loudly. My son, my grandson, and these creatures wanted to take everything from them. Freedom, future, name. I felt a wave rising inside me. But it wasn't hysteria. It was power. The power of a tsunami that has already formed in the ocean and is now inexorably moving toward the shore. Luther, I said without turning around, block the trench by any means. Call the Federal Reserve, the FBI, connect our people in financial monitoring. That money must not reach them. Will do. And what about them? I turned in the mirror opposite. I saw my reflection. There was no pity in my eyes. With them, we won't just stop them. We will give them the opportunity to bury themselves even deeper. I returned to the desk and picked up the phone. Tiffany wanted to meet to get Marcus' confession. She won't get it. But she will get another offer, one her greed won't allow her to refuse. I looked at the document about the license pledge. They bet everything. That means they must lose everything, including their freedom. I dialed Tiffany's number. Hello, Tiff. It's Eleanor Vance. Yes, I know about the police. I know about Marcus' debts. No, don't hang up. I'm not calling to fight. I'm calling to negotiate. I want to buy his freedom. A pause hung on the other end of the line. I heard her breathing, the greedy, ragged breathing of a predator catching the scent of easy prey. And what do you propose? She asked cautiously. The condo, my condo on the Gold Coast, and the summer house in exchange for withdrawing the report and waiving alimony. The condo. The light cut through her voice. The penthouse? Yes. Only I need you to give written guarantees. Of course, she almost squealed. When? Today? At 3 o'clock at the Conservatory Cafe. Come alone. I pressed end call. She bit. Of course she bit. Greed was always her weak spot. She thinks she won. She thinks I surrendered. She doesn't know that I'm going to this meeting not with condo documents. I am going there with a wire and a tactical team waiting for my signal in the next room. Preston pledged my empire. Tiffany tried to drive my son insane. Now there will be no mercy. None ever. The Conservatory Cafe was chosen not by chance. A quiet corner in the city center, drowning in the greenery of palms and ficus trees, creating an illusion of comfort and safety. The ideal place for soul-to-soul talks and for traps. I arrived 10 minutes early, took a table deep in the hall by a window, looking out into the courtyard. I wore a simple beige blouse and that antique cameo brooch my husband gave me for our silver anniversary. Today, this brooch performed a special function. Inside its frame was mounted a professional-grade microphone capable of picking up even a whisper. I ordered tea and waited. My phone lay on the table, screen down. Luther and his people were in a van in the parking lot, listening to every word live. 2 more operatives in plain clothes sat at the next table, pretending to be a couple in love. Tiffany appeared right at 3. She looked different. Where did the haughty socialite in the champagne dress go? Today before me was a modest, tear-stained woman in a gray cardigan. No makeup, with eyes red from crying. Excellent acting. If I didn't know the truth, I might have even pied her. Mrs. Vance, she rushed to me, nearly knocking over a chair. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I'm so worried, so scared for Marcus. She plopped onto the chair opposite and grabbed my hands. Her palms were damp and cold. Calm down, Tiff, I said softly, trying to make my voice tremble just enough for the role of a frightened mother. Tell me what is happening. Marcus says he's innocent, but oh, Mrs. Vance, she sobbed, wiping her eyes with a paper napkin. Marcus, he's not himself. I don't know what happened to him. Gambling addiction probably, or bad company. He took everything from the house. The family silver. Daddy's coins. Daddy is furious. He wants to put him away. Says a thief should sit in prison. I listened and nodded, looking into her honest eyes. I saw how she tracked my reaction. Does the old fool believe? Is she scared? But that's prison, Tiff. I pressed a hand to my chest closer to the brooch. He has a son. Your son. Would you really let the father of your child sit behind bars? Tiffany sniffled and lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I tried, Mrs. Vance. I begged Daddy. I said, Daddy, pity the grandson. But he is adamant. The damage is huge. 250,000 plus moral damages. He says only full reimbursement can stop him. She paused, giving me time to realize the hopelessness of the situation. I don't have that kind of money, Tiff, I whispered. All funds are in the business. Accounts are controlled. You know that. I know. She covered my hand with hers. But I came up with a way out. Daddy, he respects real estate. If we offer him something of equal value, for example, your condo on the Gold Coast, he will agree to withdraw the report. I'll persuade him for the baby's sake. There it is, the condo. A 5-bedroom dream penthouse in an elite building worth almost $3 million. It wasn't just compensation. It was a jackpot. I looked at her. In her eyes, through the veil of fake tears, the cold fire of greed burned. She was already mentally arranging her furniture there. But it's my only home. Where will I go? Oh, come on. She waved her hand. You can live at the estate in Bington. The air is beautiful. It's good for health. and we'll process the condo as collateral temporarily until Marcus returns the debt. Honest word. Honest word from a woman who forged her husband's signatures and recorded his breakdowns on video. I sighed deeply, portraying acceptance of the inevitable. Okay, Tiff. If this is the only way to save my son, I agree. I will sign over the condo, but I need to know for sure. If I give the documents, you will withdraw the report today and forgive him all these invented debts. I pronounced the word invented with emphasis. It was a test. Of course, she exclaimed, her eyes flashed predatorily. I swear on my child's health. As soon as we sign the deed of gift, the pledge agreement, Daddy will immediately call the detective. The case will be closed due to reconciliation of parties. Marcus will be free. And a receipt? I asked. Will you give me a receipt that there are no more claims? Yes, anything you want. She dug into her bag. I even have a form with me. Daddy prepared it just in case. She laid a paper on the table. I briefly scanned the text. It wasn't a reconciliation agreement. It was a deed of gift, a clean, unconditional deed of gift for the apartment without any obligations on their part. Tiff, but it says deed of gift here, I said, confused. It's to simplify the procedure, Mrs. Vance, she rattled off. To pay fewer taxes. You understand bureaucracy. We are family. We won't cheat you. I looked at her with a long gaze. Okay, I said quietly. I'll sign tomorrow. I need to gather the documents. Tomorrow? Disappointment flashed in her voice. Can't we do it today? Daddy is very angry. I'm afraid by morning he might change his mind and let the case proceed. The documents are in a bank deposit box. Tiff, the bank is already closed. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock at the notary. Fine, she reluctantly agreed, hiding the paper back in her bag. At 10 o'clock, but don't be late, please. Every minute counts. She stood up, pecked me on the cheek. The kiss was dry and fast like a snake bite, and hurried to the exit. Until tomorrow, Mrs. Vance, everything will be fine. I remained sitting at the table. The waiter brought the check. I paid, leaving a generous tip. Luther, did you get that? I asked, touching the brooch. Every word, the voice sounded in my earpiece. Extortion in the first degree. Fraud. Coercion into a transaction. We have a full bouquet. Excellent. Track her. I walked out of the cafe and got into Luther's car. He handed me a tablet. Look, we intercepted her message. On the screen was a screenshot of a text chain. Tiffany. The old fool bought it. Condo is ours. Signs tomorrow. Tiffany and Marcus. Let him sit a bit for prevention. Contact Daddy. You're a genius, Daddy. Good job, daughter. I knew she would break. Get the champagne ready. Turn the guy over to the cops right after the deal. Let him know his place. I read these lines. An icy calm spread inside me. They didn't even intend to keep their promises. They wanted to take the apartment and put Marcus in jail anyway. They wanted to destroy us completely. Old fool, I repeated aloud. Well, let's see which of us is the fool. Miss Ellie, Luther turned to me. We are ready to take them. Enough material for an arrest. No. I shook my head. Arrest is too simple, too fast. They won't understand what they are being punished for. They will consider themselves victims of arbitrariness. I looked at the screen where the message about champagne glowed. Tomorrow is Preston's benefit, the Entrepreneur of the Year award ceremony. All of Chicago's high society will be there. He wants glory. He will get it. You want to strike at the ball. I want their fall to be public. I want every person in this city to know who they are so that even the rats turn away from them. I leaned back in the seat. Prepare the documents, Luther. We are buying out their debts, every penny. Tomorrow morning, I become the owner of their lives. And when Preston goes on stage to receive his award, I will be there to present him the real prize. The car moved. I looked at the city they considered their playground. Tomorrow this game ends and I will dictate the rules. The day of reckoning arrived. It was sunny, piercingly clear, just like my plan. While Tiffany waited for me at the notary, nervously checking her watch, I naturally didn't show up. Sending a message about a sudden migraine attack. I sat in the office of the chairman of the board of Northern Capital Bank. Eleanor, are you sure? He asked, looking through a thick stack of assignment agreements. You are buying the debts of individual Preston C. Galloway and the legal entity Midwest Cargo LLC with a discount, but the sum is still impressive. This is a risky asset. It's not an asset, Paul, I answered, signing the last page with my signature fountain pen. It's a tool and I know how to use it. At 12 and sharp, the procedure was completed. Now I own not only the land under their house, I own their mortgage, their car loans, their overdrafts, and even the debts on Tiffany's credit cards, which she loved to empty in Milan boutiques. I became their sole creditor, their judge, and their executioner. Thank you. I stood up and shook the banker's hand. And one more request. Block their accounts. Everything right now. Reason: suspicious activity and change of creditor. Will do. I walked out onto the street. The air seemed especially fresh. I got into the car where Marcus was waiting for me. He was in a new tailored suit, clean-shaven, calm. I returned his confidence. I returned him to his place. Ready? I asked. Yes, Mama. Then let's go. We are expected at the ball. The charity gala, Evening of White Nights, was held at the Palmer House Hilton. Luxury glitter, the city's elite. Preston Galloway was supposed to be the star of this evening. He was being awarded Entrepreneur of the Year for an innovative approach in logistics. An innovative approach consisting of stealing from his mother-in-law. We entered through a side entrance unnoticed by the press. I took a seat in a box hidden by velvet curtains. From here the whole hall was in the palm of my hand. I saw Preston. He stood in the center of the room shining like a polished samovar. He wore a tuxedo from Brioni, bought undoubtedly with money stolen from the company. Next to him, Tiffany, in a scarlet dress with a deep neckline, laughed at a joke from some senator. They looked like winners. They thought I was broken and Marcus crushed. But something in the atmosphere of the room was wrong. People smiled at Preston, shook his hand, but walking away, immediately started whispering. The glances were not admiring, but evaluating. Curious, as if they were looking at a tightrope walker walking without insurance who doesn't yet know the rope has been sawed through. Preston felt it too. I saw him nervously adjusting his tie, his smile becoming more and more strained. He searched with his eyes for his partners, that same owl, but they weren't there. The owl, by the way, was already giving testimony at the FBI office. My lawyers and connections worked flawlessly. At 7:55, 5 minutes before Preston's walk to the stage, I gave the signal to Luther. Time. Luther pressed a button on his tablet. Down in the hall, Preston's phone beeped. He took it out of his pocket casually with the look of a busy man, glanced at the screen and froze. I saw through binoculars the color drained from his face. He became white as his starched shirt. Message from the bank. Your accounts are seized. Access to funds blocked. Reason: suspicious transaction. Please contact the new creditor. He started frantically poking his finger at the screen, trying to log into the app. Error. He looked up and met Tiffany's gaze. She was also looking at her phone. Daddy, she whispered with just her lips, but I understood. Cards aren't working. The payment for catering didn't go through. Preston looked around. Fear, sticky fear began to seep through his mask of arrogance. He understood something had gone wrong, but he didn't yet understand the scale of the catastrophe. He thought it was a mistake, a glitch, someone's bad joke. The host on stage announced, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, the culmination of our evening. A man who proved that business can be an art. Please welcome Preston Galloway." The applause was thin. Preston flinched. He needed to go on stage, walk and smile. While in his pocket, the phone vibrated with new notifications about property seizures. He took a step, then another. His gait was wooden. He walked up the stairs like onto a scaffold. I put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Watch, son. Remember, this is what a man looks like who built his house on sand. And now the storm begins. I nodded to the technician sitting at the screen control console. He was my guy. On the huge LED screen behind Preston's back, instead of his company logo and beautiful growth charts, a video began to load. Preston approached the microphone. He opened his mouth to deliver his prepared speech about tradition and honor, but he didn't manage to say a word. Behind his back, filling the entire hall, rang Tiffany's voice, loud, clear, amplified by the powerful acoustics of the palace. The old fool bought it. Condo is ours. Signs tomorrow. And Marcus, let him sit a bit for prevention. Daddy, you're a genius. The hall gasped. The silence became dead. Preston turned around. On the screen in giant resolution hung a screenshot of their texts, and next to it, a scan of Marcus' forged signature and the expert's conclusion. Falsification. Preston staggered and grabbed the podium to keep from falling. I stood up from my seat in the box. The spotlight, obeying my script, snatched me out of the darkness. "Good evening, Preston." My voice, calm and commanding, carried over the hall without a microphone. "I am that old fool, and I came to collect my debts." All heads turned to me. Hundreds of eyes, but I looked only at him, at the man who considered himself a king, but turned out to be naked. The trap slammed shut. I walked down the stairs from the box slowly. Every step echoed in the silence of the hall like the beat of a metronome. Marcus walked behind me holding his head high. I felt hundreds of gazes on me. Amazed, frightened, hungry for scandal. But for me, only one person existed. Preston. He stood on the stage, gripping the podium with whitened fingers. His face went red in patches. Sweat ran down his temples under the stage makeup. The screen behind him continued to broadcast evidence of his worthlessness. Forged signatures, money-laundering schemes, videos of Tiffany's tantrums. It wasn't just dirt. It was the anatomy of their rot. When I approached the stage, Preston suddenly came alive. Fear was replaced by the rage of a cornered rat. He grabbed the microphone and his voice breaking into a squeal cut the ears. "This is a lie. This is all montage. Deep fake." He poked a finger at the screen, then at me. "This woman is crazy. She is avenging me because we kicked out her talentless son. Security, remove her from here." Security didn't budge. The head of Palace Security intercepted my gaze and gave a barely noticeable nod. He knew who was actually paying for this banquet. "Gentlemen," Preston appealed to the hall, spreading his arms in a gesture of a martyr. "You know me. I am Preston Galloway, a man of honor, and this is just a market trader. A woman from the slums who accidentally got rich in the 90s. She envies our breeding, our culture." The hall was silent. No one stood up for him. No one shouted shame. Business people possess an animal instinct for losers. And right now, Preston Ryer of failure from a mile away. I walked up onto the stage calmly without rushing and stood next to him. He was a head taller than me, but right now he seemed like a small hunched old man. I walked to the mic stand. Preston tried to push me away, but Marcus gently but firmly intercepted his hand. "Don't, Dad," he said quietly. "Just listen." I looked into the hall, then turned to Preston. "Preston Galloway." My voice was even without a shadow of emotion. "You are right about one thing. I really did start in the slums. I loaded crates, slept in the cab of a truck, and counted every penny. And you know what? Those very slums that you despise so much built the house you slept in last night. They paid for this tuxedo. They bought you this status." Preston opened his mouth to object, but I raised a hand, demanding silence. "You said that our blood doesn't match yours, that it's too simple. Well, I have good news for you. You are no longer connected to this simple blood. I am freeing you from this burden." I took a thin folder from my purse and placed it on the podium before him. "What is this?" He wheezed. "This is a notice of liquidation. Your firm is no more. Midwest Cargo is declared insolvent. All assets have passed to the primary creditor, me." "You don't have the right," he started, but his voice trembled. "I do. As the owner of 100% of your debt obligations, I also annulled the land lease agreement under your mansion. Clause 4.2. Bad faith conduct of the tenant. Stealing from the landlord is very bad faith, Preston." He swayed. His eyes darted around the hall looking for support, but encountered only cold, detached faces. And lastly, I pointed to the screen where the prosecutor's conclusion glowed. I handed the originals of all documents to the FBI. Forgery of signatures, fraud, grand larceny. You so wanted to send my son to prison. Well, you dug a pit. Welcome to it. Preston looked at me and I saw his world collapsing in his eyes. His illusory world built on lies and other people's money. You destroyed everything," he whispered. "You destroyed a family." "No, Preston, I just turned on the lights, and what you called a family turned out to be a cockroach nest. And then happened what I was waiting for. The final chord of their hysteria." Tiffany, who had stood in a stupor on the side of the stage all this time, suddenly broke from her spot. Her face was twisted into a mask of insane rage. Bitch! She shrieked, throwing herself at me, fingers spread, aiming for my face with her nails. I hate you. I'll kill you. Give me my money. The hall gasped. Marcus jerked to shield me, but he didn't make it in time. Luther, materializing from the shadows of the wings, intercepted her hand in midair. Easily, professionally, without unnecessary movement. Tiffany hung in his grip, kicking her legs in the air. Her scarlet dress rode up, exposing ridiculous lace underwear. It was the end. End of the lady image. End of dignity. Luther carefully set her on her feet, but didn't let go of her hand. With his other hand, he took a folded sheet of paper from his inner pocket and put it in her free palm. Citizen Tiffany Galloway, he pronounced in his dispassionate baritone, heard even in the back rows thanks to the microphone on the stand. This is an eviction notice. Marshals are already working at the property. You have 2 hours to collect personal belongings. A list of items allowed for removal is attached. Jewelry, furs, and art objects are seized to pay off the debt. Tiffany looked at the paper, then at me, then at her father and howled. It wasn't crying. It was the howl of a beaten dog whose bone had been taken away. Daddy, do something. Daddy. But Daddy couldn't do anything anymore. Preston slumped to the floor right on stage, clutching his head in his hands. His tuxedo crumpled, his bow tie slid to the side. He was crushed not by me but by his own greed and stupidity. I looked at them from above. At this couple who just an hour ago considered themselves the elite. Marcus, I said calmly. Let's go. We have nothing more to do here. My son walked up to me, took my arm. He didn't look at his ex-wife. He looked forward over the heads toward where the exit was. Goodbye, gentlemen. I threw to the hall. I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to check your pockets. Next to such people you always need to be on guard. We descended from the stage into dead silence. People parted before us like the sea before Moses. I walked with a straight back, feeling the warmth of my son's hand. I felt no gloating, only tiredness and a huge pure relief. The tumor was removed. The organism could start healing. At the exit I turned back. Security was already lifting Preston by the arms, and Tiffany was thrashing in hysteria, trying to hit Luther with her purse. They got exactly what they deserved. Public shame and total oblivion. Let's go home, Mama, Marcus said. Trey is waiting. Let's go, I smiled. Now we are truly going home. 2 weeks passed. The name Galloway is now whispered in Chicago like the name of a nasty disease. Preston is sitting in jail awaiting trial on 5 counts, and his lawyers change faster than the weather outside the window. They have no money to pay them. Tiffany moved into a studio apartment in Gary, Indiana, 400 square feet on the outskirts where she finally has to wash her own clothes and count change at the grocery store. Let her get used to it. It's a useful experience. Marcus returned to the CEO chair. Only now he is different. The softness that predators like so much has disappeared from his gaze. Now there is steel. He works hard, clearly without unnecessary emotions. Yesterday he fired the head of purchasing for a kickback without even flinching. He learned the lesson. And I sit on the same bench in the park where it all began. Around me is golden autumn. The air is transparent and fresh. But now there are no suitcases and no despair here. My grandson, rosy-cheeked and happy, runs along the alley chasing a fat pigeon. His laughter rings like a bell, dispersing the silence. I put down my phone. No urgent messages, no anxious calls. My empire runs like a clock and my rear is protected. I feel a sunbeam touch my cheek. And for the first time in many years I don't want to run anywhere. I didn't just save my son. I gave him the main inheritance, the understanding that dignity isn't passed down with genes and isn't bought with a title. It must be defended every day. I take a small simple thermos out of my bag. No silver, no gilding, ordinary steel. I pour hot tea with thyme into the cup lid. Steam rises up, dissolving in the autumn air. A woman with a stroller walks by. She catches my gaze. I smile at her simply, openly, without the mask of the Iron Lady. She smiles back. I have nothing more to hide and no one to fear. I am free. So, friends, how did you like the finale? Agree. The story turned out tough but fair. Eleanor Vance acted as a mother and a strong woman should. She didn't tolerate humiliation, didn't play the victim. She answered a blow with a blow, and that answer was crushing. How would you have acted in her place? Many write that revenge is a dish best served cold. But here it wasn't even revenge, but a restoration of justice. Or do you think she crossed the line, stripping the Galloways of everything? Write your opinion in the comments. I am very interested to read your thoughts. Did she do the right thing by not sparing even her enemy's grandson's lifestyle? Or should evil be punished totally? If you like this story, if you worried for the heroes and rejoiced at the triumph of justice, be sure to like this video. It is the best reward for me. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. We have many more exciting plots ahead about life, betrayal, and retribution. Do you have questions about the plot? Maybe some points remained unclear. Ask in the comments. I will try to answer everyone. Your activity helps the channel grow. We wish you all the best. At the end of this video, a window will appear in the center of the screen.